Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
The story.
You've got a newborn, you're not sleeping, you're anxious over everything. I'm in and out of hospital, so I'm separated from her a lot. I'm in pain constantly, and the pain is just not going away. And I remember those first 3 months, my one prayer, before God was always, just take this pain away. Just take the pain away so I can focus, so that I can enjoy my baby.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colefax. Welcome to The Story. Well, today we have part 2 of our conversation with Dr Mirette Abraham, who's the author of the book Mama, I See You, Finding Glimmers of Hope in the Trenches of Motherhood. Last time we heard that Mirette was born in Egypt and migrated to Australia when she was only 1 year old. Then, after embarking on a career as a medical doctor, she found herself struggling with anxiety and depression soon after becoming a mother. And that's where we'll pick up from today, as Dr Mirette Abraham continues her chat with Eric Scatterbo from her home in Sydney.
It started off, my labour was really long, didn't really think much of it, but, I just thought that's just how labour is. This is supposed to be difficult. A baby's entry into the world is not going to be easy. But then about 24 hours after I had delivered my baby girl, she went blue and she stopped breathing.
Oh, wow.
And that image, just seeing her that way, just sent a bolt down my spine. I didn't know what to do, how to react. And there was no struggle. So it was silent. She went blue. She didn't struggle with the choking, with the phlegm that was getting obstructed. She didn't struggle.
Yeah.
And so thankfully the pediatrician was in the room at the time, and we took her straight to the special care nursery, and she needed extra intervention and she needed lines and things. And that for me was the start that birthed my anxiety, I feel. After that, it happened one more time after she left the nursery. Again, it was silent. It happened while she was sleeping. We caught it early because I was watching her like a hawk. But I just couldn't shake that image of her not being able to breathe and not really trying to, not knowing what to do. And I couldn't sleep. I'd spend all my waking hours, whether she was awake or asleep, watching her.
Yeah.
Nighttime was really difficult for me to get some shut eye because I just couldn't shake that image. I kept thinking, if I fall asleep and she dies in her sleep, that's on me. So I put that on me. And so the sleeplessness and that image, I just, it really played on my mind. Along with that, the 3 months after delivery, I have a chronic illness. And so that flared up. And so I was in and out of hospital.
Oh, what happened?
So I've got a bowel condition, an autoimmune condition. And so it's known that after pregnancy, sometimes you can get flares. But I started getting this unusual pain that wasn't characteristic. And so we needed to investigate. And I went into hospital maybe 3 or 4 times to try and investigate the nature of this pain, and nobody could tell me what it was. And so I went in for surgeries and I went in for other invasive procedures. And finally we had come to the conclusion that it was just because of my chronic illness. And so once I started medications, I was okay. But by that time, you've got a newborn, you're not sleeping, you're anxious over everything. I'm in and out of hospital, so I'm separated from her a lot. I'm in pain constantly, and the pain is just not going away. And I remember those first 3 months, my one prayer, before God was always, just take this pain away. Just take the pain away so I can focus, so that I can enjoy my baby. The anxiety I will deal with. I will get to it. I can get professional help, but this pain, nobody can tell me what's happening. We can't get to the bottom of it. Nothing's working. I need help. And all I remember was silence. And you can imagine, pain has a way of just heightening everything else and making you completely oblivious to everything around you. And it just makes you focus on it. And that's all I could focus on. I was in a lot of pain. I was anxious. I was sleep deprived. I didn't know what I was doing as a new mum. I struggled with feeding. They never tell you that breastfeeding doesn't come easily to a lot of people. And so I pushed and I pushed and it didn't happen. It didn't happen for me. And obviously I'm carrying the guilt of not being able to feed my baby like the typical mum should. And so this idealistic view of motherhood, every day that passed was slipping further and further away. And, all I could think was, when am I going to get that? When am I going to get this really pleasant maternity leave or this, pleasant, joyful time?
Yeah, everything you saw on Instagram.
Everything that I saw on Instagram. When is that going to happen for me? And that just kept, I think, pulled me even further away and made me even sadder. And I remember during those times, I couldn't really verbalize what I was saying because I felt mad. I felt upset that God wasn't hearing my prayer. I felt unheard. I felt isolated. And I didn't know who to talk to. I thought I could talk to God, but I felt like he wasn't really listening to the one prayer. Like, I'm asking for one thing. And so I had this very, like I said, again, a very narrow-minded view of God. And I made him out to be like a genie, in that period. Like, this is what I want. This is what I need. This is when you'll give it to me. And I couldn't see him working at all. And so for me, that year in particular was a big struggle. And I felt deeper and deeper into, I fell into my anxiety and I fell into a depression, and I would never admit that that's what I was feeling. And I remember my husband trying to be really supportive and encouraging me to open up and talk. And I kept pushing kind of everybody away emotionally while I tried to figure this out, again, putting it on myself. And until my prayers really changed, I couldn't see God. I couldn't feel him. I couldn't really appreciate his presence or him working in my life. And at one point, I would pray and pray. I cried all the tears. I thought I had no more tears left. And at one point I just stopped. I felt like I wasn't being heard. I felt like I feel alone anyway. I may as well do it on my own. And I stopped praying, and I pretty much stopped all communication, all ties with God. I just couldn't understand. And the one recurring thought in my mind was, when somebody's upset with me, I do everything I can to fix and mend that relationship. And I kept asking God, where are my flowers? I would go out and buy flowers for the person I've upset, make it up to them, buy them a coffee. And I kept almost crying out, where are my roses? Where are my flowers? Where are the blooms that you promised me since I'm so sad? When are you coming back to mend this? And
now,
again,
correct me if I'm wrong, but your thinking was, God, you owe me this.
Exactly. I felt like it was a lot of me. And I felt like
But that was your thinking at that point.
That was my thinking at that point. And I felt like I had made the tough decision to leave a training program that I thought I liked to start a family. And, I remember thinking, what am I here on earth for? If I enter into this training program and I get taken away today and I'm at the gates of heaven and he says, what do you have? Who are you bringing with you? And I say, just me. I've been working. I had no time.
Yeah.
And I kept having that almost a nightmare. And so my reason, or I tried to convince myself that the reason I left was for that. I need to do more for the kingdom. I need to, if that means starting a family and having a baby and sharing that love of God with someone else, then that's what I'll do. And I remember thinking, I did all that. I sacrificed all of that for the kingdom. I sacrificed that for you. And here I am asking for one thing, and I'm not getting it.
Seems reasonable.
It seems reasonable to our human minds. It seems so reasonable. And my humanity really did take over everything at that point. I couldn't understand why he wasn't coming through for me on this. And until I started praying again, changing the nature of my prayer. I was away from him for that long, and until that happened, I then started to see him at work, and I then started to appreciate him.
You're listening to The Story. Today, Eric Scatterbo is once again chatting with Dr Mirette Abraham, who's sharing her life journey and how she began battling with depression and anxiety soon after the birth of her first child. Next, we'll hear more of her story and how God slowly begins to lead her out of a spiritual darkness. All that and more is coming up when we return.
If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Colefax and this is The Story. We're back with more of Eric Scatterbo chatting with Dr Mirette Abraham, who was born in Egypt and is a member of the Egyptian Coptic Christian community in Sydney. Mirette's the author of the book Mama, I See You, Finding Glimmers of Hope in the Trenches of Motherhood. Before the break, we heard how she began battling with depression and anxiety. Also, she shared how it caused her to question God and her relationship with him. Next, we'll hear how God slowly begins to lead her out of her spiritual darkness.
What was the turning point for you?
So a couple of things. The first one was, I had spoken to my father of confession, and I had said, I'm done.
What is father of confession?
So we have in our church, we've got priests. Mm-hmm. And so you choose a priest that you relate to, and you have kind of regular confession to keep you accountable for your sin. It's kind of like repentance. So you do your own repentance, you do your own reflection, and then you go to a father of confession. And it doesn't always have to be sin related.
Is that kind of like a confessional in the Catholic Church? Is that
exactly right? Yeah, exactly right.
So do you go into like a special room where you confess?
Yeah, an office or besides the altar or just in the church, just somewhere quiet. It doesn't, it's not really a dedicated place. But sometimes, I visit him a lot just for advice and just mentorship and just he becomes, a spiritual father and a spiritual guide. And so there was one point where I went to him and I said, I don't feel anything in prayer and I'm done. I don't really want to pray anymore. I'm just going to wait and see what happens, and I'll focus on my kid, and I'll focus on, I'll still come to church. I'll do all the lip service. I'll do everything that I have to. I'll do the checkbox that I was doing before. But in terms of my relationship with God, I just didn't feel like there was anything there at that point. And he said, look, I understand it's really hard to be going through what you're going through and let alone go through that and not feel him. And it's hard to, stand up in prayer or kneel in prayer and give him thanks when you feel so empty and you feel like there's nothing to be thankful for. But just start your day by saying thank you for something. Just open a line of communication. And so I did start with that. And then my next line of prayer was meet me here. Meet me here in my pain. Meet me in my chaos. Meet me in my sadness. Meet me here and show me yourself so that I can find my way back to you, because I'm stuck and I don't know what to do.
So going back to some very basic things, gratitude and meet me here.
Exactly.
And also your mother played a role in your life at that point. Yeah.
So Mum, I feel like I gave her, a hard time growing up because I never really spoke to her, and I iced her out a lot as a teenager. But Mum was the one person who, I remember I'll tell you a story. So we were actually out furniture shopping, and, my husband was looking after my daughter, and we just wanted to buy some furniture, and I had found a great warehouse sale. So we were going to get nice, cheap, good looking furniture. It was quite far. And we got everything we needed. And on the way back, I'm driving us back, and she she's sitting in the passenger seat and she turned around and she simply asked if I'm okay. I said, I tried to kind of brush it off. I'm like,
Mothers know these things, right?
yeah. I tried to kind of brush her off before she gets a bit deeper and then I get more emotional. And I said, what do you mean? She's like, you're not the same. You're withdrawing. You're not hanging out with people anymore. Every time she had people over, I'd message her and say, sorry, we're going back home. Like I wouldn't even go in and entertain the thought of saying hi to other people that I knew. They just saw family and friends. And she noticed that change. She noticed a shift in me. And after she said that out loud, for one person to see that, I was so overwhelmed and I just broke down. And I said, Mum, I'm not okay. I'm struggling. I'm drowning. I feel sad all the time. I'm anxious all the time. And I just couldn't help. It's like the tears just wanted to break and they didn't have permission to do so until that point. And her letting me talk about it, her letting me, surrender them to her, just lifted a weight that I didn't feel up until that point. That weightlessness of love, I didn't feel, I hadn't felt at that point. And so just her listening to me and her being there for me and giving me little tips and strategies how to manage practically, and just the assurance that she was there was enough to kind of propel me onto this journey of healing. So after that point, I said, this is it. This is enough. This helped. Let's find other ways I can help myself. And there was another point. I was downstairs in the kitchen. I just kind of prayed and felt nothing and cried and cried and cried and still nothing.
Yeah.
And I came downstairs and I'm already angry and upset and frustrated. And I come downstairs and trying to do things in the kitchen around the house, and my daughter wasn't listening. She was 2 and a bit at the time and she wasn't listening. And it was no, 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 no. And I had it. We never give timeouts in our house, but I gave her a timeout. I gave her 2 timeouts. I gave her 4 timeouts, 5 timeouts. Nothing was working, to the point where after the 5th or 6th time, she took herself to the step for her timeout because she knew that's where I was sending her. And I was just livid. I was really upset, and I don't even remember why at this point. And I remember trying to get distracted with the housework, with the chores, and I turn around and I see my husband sitting on the step with her, and he's got her head kind of on his shoulder, and they're just talking, and they're just sweetly talking and sweetly acknowledging each other and just having a chat. And as soon as that was over, she came up to me and she said, I'm sorry. And she went about her day and it was completely fine. And that image of true self-sacrificial love that came from my husband, sitting on that step, pride aside, sitting on that step with her in her corner of trouble, in the point, in the part that she's withdrawn herself to, just took me back to Christ. And like, this is Christ. He did that so many times in scripture. This is the Christ who we know and love. The Samaritan woman was a big deal for me during this period, just having that image and that trying to replay that conversation between her and Christ at the well, and reflecting on that was a big thing for me during this time of healing. It had a huge impact on me. Met her.
Yeah, what a beautiful image that, in the same way that God meets us when we're in trouble and in despair, you're saying that you're seeing in your husband, him meeting your daughter, your child, in that same place of trouble as well. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, exactly.
And that really ministered to you, touched your heart?
It really did. It really brought that encounter with the Samaritan woman to life. And it just reminded me that he does that with us.
The unconditional love.
Yeah. He meets us here.
Yeah.
And he met her in the heat of the day when she was trying to avoid the shame and the people, and she knew she was judged by everyone, and she knew she wasn't liked by everyone, and she went about her chores as normal, and he met her when she didn't want to be met. He met her when she was avoiding everyone, you know.
Now for people who are not familiar with the story of the Samaritan woman, she was living in adultery at the time, and went to the well to get some water, and Jesus ministered to her. Yeah,
that's right. And as well, the people of Samaria weren't really accepted by the Jewish people who, you know,
they weren't accepted. Yeah.
No. So she had kind of felt like an outcast on two.
Yeah, for many reasons. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he met her there at the well.
Yeah, he did. And it's a reminder that nothing, you know, can separate us from him. Not our shame, not our despair, not our sadness. He is still here. He still meets us where we are. And with his, you know, purest, unrelenting love, he persists, and he sits there and waits for acknowledgement. And he sits there and he meets us in the heat of the day, in the chaos of the moment, in the middle of temper tantrums, in the middle of, you know, if you see my kitchen downstairs right now, he's sitting there right there with me. You know, he's there. And so seeing that image of my husband and my daughter on the step just brought that reminder to life. Now, if a human being can show that love to a little girl who really doesn't understand much, what is God trying to show me right now that I'm not being responsive to? And so that's when my prayer changed to meet me here. Meet me where I am. I'm drowning. I'm sad. I'm anxious. I'm so disconnected from myself. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know who I am as a mom, let alone, you know, who I am as an individual. Meet me here in my confusion and transform my confusion for good. Transform this period for good.
Let me just interrupt at this point, because this is something that you and I have spoken about before starting this interview. One of the reasons why you were depressed is that you expected everything to be Instagrammable, something for social media. And this is something that, unfortunately, I'm finding, I can't relate to it myself as a guy, but unfortunately, a lot of ladies, a lot of mothers constantly are comparing themselves with other ladies, other mothers who seem to have everything together on Instagram or on Facebook or whatever. And this is one of the challenges, that if you constantly compare yourself, you're constantly going to be depressed, because life is not like Instagram or Facebook.
No.
There is going to be sleepless nights. There's going to be vomiting. There's going to be fevers. You know, the list goes on. It's not like Instagram. Now, for me personally, I don't compare myself with others. I got my own problems. But if I wanted to do that, I could get myself depressed very easily. So life is hard enough without trying to compare. Now, I'd feel like telling all mothers, just stop it. Just stop it. Don't do that. But it's a little bit more complicated than that.
It's a lot more complicated, I feel, because we know, a lot of us know our worth, and we struggle with our worth a lot. So we might know something, and then someone says something to us that goes against what we know, and then all of a sudden you question what you know. And for me, you know, you already have so much uncertainty when it comes to your kids. You know, why is she vomiting? I don't know. Is she sick? Did she eat too much? You don't know. Is it more serious than that? You know, why did she trip? Is it because of me? Is it because of the shoes? Is it we already carry such a mental load and such guilt over things that are truly outside of our control, but we feel like we've been entrusted with this life.
Yeah, you want to do your best.
You want to do your best, and if that means, you know, changing the shoes because you feel like they're the culprit for tripping, you do that. And so when someone comes in and says something like, is your child sleeping? And then you respond with no, and then they give you all these tips, you always think it's on you. It's you're the reason that they're not sleeping. You're the reason they're not thriving. And so you carry even more guilt. And so you start to compare even the little things, like that little kid is the same age as mine and they're speaking these many words. Why isn't mine? Is this a reflection of me?
It never ends. It snowballs,
It never
right?
ends.
Yeah.
It never ends. And
Don't
so
do it. Don't do it.
We do compare, and as hard as it is to be confident and happy with the way you parent and the way you mother, and your motherhood is truly a reflection of the love of God that you've just passed on. Unless you're confident in that, unfortunately, we keep comparing.
And
that's the unfortunate reality.
Yeah, let me just add, like, if somebody said to themselves, I'm struggling in parenting, but, I'm not a doctor. If I was a doctor and I do all this medical stuff, surely everything would be fine. But now you're blowing that out of the water.
No, yep, sorry.
Even doctors are struggling.
Well, that was part 2 of Eric Scadabo's conversation with Dr Mirette Abraham, who's sharing her life journey and how God began to lead her out of the spiritual darkness she'd found herself in. As you know, Mirette isn't alone. She had expectations of how God was supposed to be and what she thought motherhood was supposed to be based on what she saw other mothers posting on Instagram. But when it didn't turn out that way, she began struggling with anxiety and depression. She started to question everything she knew about God and life. But we also heard how God began working in her life and slowly teaching her about his true character and her relationship with him. Well, how about you? Has life sent you some curveballs? Are you struggling with unmet expectations? And has all of this left you confused and depressed? Well, the Bible says God rewards those who earnestly seek him. Why not call out to God today so you can begin healing and getting to know God better than ever before, just like Mirette began doing in her life? If you'd like to pray with someone about this, our prayer line is open right now. 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. And we'd love to pray with you on that number once again, 1-800-772-936. 936. Well, we invite you to join us again next time for the conclusion of Mirette's story. Until then, I'm Jimmy Colefax, encouraging you to share your story with someone today.
Next time on The Story.
I had spoken about my career and how I felt like it all kind of went away, but he somehow found a way to get me back on track completely out of the blue. And I feel like we always think that God doesn't care about these tiny details in our lives, but God cares about every little thing that we care about.
Dr Mirette Abraham joins us once again to share how God leads her out of spiritual darkness after she became depressed after the birth of her first child. Mirette is the author of the book Mama, I See You, Finding Glimmers of Hope in the Trenches of Motherhood. That's Dr Mirette Abraham sharing more of her story next time.
The Story. Just another way Vision is helping you look to God daily.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.